South fans, we've come away with a 3-2 victory here at Lakeside Stadium against the Tagalakis coached Kingston City. It was an interesting encounter, South fans, one which I felt in general South Melbourne largely dominated, but credit to Kingston. Whilst they were, in my opinion, fundamentally outclassed, especially in the first 20 minutes where really South almost steamrolled Kingston. They did gradually come into the game, and to their credit, scored an absolute barnstormer in the first half. Perhaps you could argue when they didn't deserve it, but certainly in the second half, the game was far more balanced and even. And the late goal they scored, I think, somewhat flattered them. A final score of 3-2, I felt, it probably doesn't reflect that South, in my opinion, were at least a 20 or 30% better team. I felt a score of 4-2 would have been more, I guess, reflective of the general way the game went. However, as always, it was great to see a team of youngsters, which primarily make up Kingston, put up a good fight, and I certainly wish Tagalakis and his team the best for the season. So, on to, studying South Melbourne for tonight's game. We effectively had the same lineup as our game against Altona. So we started with Pierce Clark in goals, Amadou Karoma at right back, Lirim Almazi playing in central defence along with Jake Marshall. At left back, we had Brad Norton playing in a defensive midfield role. We had Irish signing Stephen Follen. Again, for all the listeners who are potentially not aware, because you might be saying, why isn't Luke Pavlu starting? Why isn't Follen playing in central defence? The fact of the matter is that Luke Pavlu is suspended for round one. So I think Coach Esteban Quintas is trying to figure out who can effectively replace Luke Pavlu for that first, encounter against Heidelberg. And he has been experimenting with Stephen Follen in that position in our last two friendly matches. Joining Follen in a midfield position was Melvin Beckett, along with new signing Daniel Clark. The front three, if you'd like, were made up of youngster Matthew Loutrakis, Chris Irwin, who took up a position on the left, Loutrakis was on the right, and Harrison Sawyer effectively led the line for the boys in blue. Now, players who didn't participate at all today, however, they were pretty much all present. I basically saw some of them warming up, and I think in the case of Marcus Schroen, whilst he didn't warm up, he certainly was present here today. So these players are carrying slight knocks. My understanding is they're not knocks that would keep them, out of contention for commencing, the start of the season. I think it's more preventative, to be fair. So not participating today were Marcus Schroen, as mentioned, Peter Skapetis, who did warm up with the team, so that's a good sign. I think he's obviously very close to rejoining training, or maybe he has. Probably may expect him to play in our next friendly game. Jerry Salathos didn't play today. Again, he warmed up with the team in a more sort of less heavier workload, but he was out there before the game commenced. Zach Bates, similar to Jerry, also did some light work. He was kitted up in his training gear, so he's obviously starting to get very close to coming back. And Ben Jibber, was also out there, but didn't participate. I did hear that he does have a little bit of a knock. It is worth mentioning that one player who hasn't played at all this preseason, I did see him at St Albans. I believe he has been carrying an injury pretty much for the entire preseason, but he has, maybe started to rejoin training. It's probably something that I'll need to confirm with Coach Esteban Quintas if I ever get to speak to him, is Josh Meeker. So he's obviously a player that we picked up from Bentley, ex-South Melbourne youngster. Think he's been picked up maybe to be, obviously to push for a spot in the 11, but it's going to be a very, very hard 11 to break into. I think potentially as cover for Luke Pavlu, if he can obviously get onto the field. So he I didn't see him in the stands. He certainly wasn't kitted up, but I apologise to Josh Meeker if he indeed was here. So onto the game. We absolutely, as mentioned right at the beginning, came out of the block, South fans. It was great to see. Lakeside Stadium was looking an absolute treat with our new white tunnel. Finally the Hell in the Cell cage has been replaced. With a really, really nice tunnel. So it was great to see that fit in. The pitch was looking an absolute treat. It even had, he wasn't checkered marking. It was that line marking effect. I'm sure I've posted a video, or there's one photo actually that I've posted in my Twitter. In my Twitter coverage for the game. So you'll be able to see what that looked like. And my understanding is the Lakeside Stadium athletics track has also been replaced. It is still blue, but there are certain areas which are just, off the track, which are now in the colour black. And I think actually it looks quite nice in general with the sunshine out today. It looked like an absolutely, immaculate facility. Obviously it is, one of the best facilities in Australian football. And as voted by Jamie Reid, ex-South Melbourne player who has also played at Wembley Stadium, his favourite ground of all time. So, on to the game. In the first, we effectively came straight out of the blocks, 4 minutes into the game. A great free kick from Daniel Clark from the left. And it's worth mentioning that Clark took quite a few free kicks today, and he also put in a couple of crosses. He really does have a really good feel for putting a cross in the right area. Like, it's been very, very encouraging, South fans, to see a player who we've just brought to the club, essentially be able to offer that, really effortlessly. I lost count. I reckon he put in 3 or 4 good balls, and in the 4th minute, he put an absolute peach of a free kick to the back post from the left-hand side, and there was youngster Matthew Loutrakis to head home, headed straight into the ground, probably 4 or 5 yards out, unmarked, to, I think, score probably his first goal with the senior team, even though it was in a friendly match, but more importantly, to give South Melbourne a 1-0 lead. And, as mentioned, it was quite impressive how sharp we were right at the beginning there, because in the 7th minute, Chris Irwin was released down the left, and of course he has thundering pace, took a couple of touches, squared the ball early with his left foot right across, the 18-yard area. There was Harrison Sawyer in front of the Kingston defence. They effectively tried to desperately challenge him. Instead of getting the ball, they took his legs. It was a penalty. He stepped up. This time, unlike against the game, against St Albans, where he also scored a penalty, he sent the keeper the wrong way and scored his second goal of pre-season, also from a penalty. So it was great to get to that 2-0 lead. It was hard to say because we haven't seen the team play. So I wasn't, for example, certain that we'd absolutely go on and steamroll them. But certainly in those, in that first 10 to 20 minute period, we looked really, really good. And, it did cross my mind that potentially we might score 3, 4, 5 goals today. Ultimately, though, it didn't happen. The game sort of went in a bit of a lull from a chance perspective. We were dominating possession. We did look like we had maybe a few more gears to lift. Certainly, I was really enjoying the combinations between Norton and Irwin. I really think, it's a big call to say this. It's quite early on in the season. Obviously, we haven't commenced any of our games yet. The South Melbourne left-hand side was quite dominant in the years of, Brad Norton and Nicholas Epifano. Today I saw signs of Brad Norton and Chris Irwin being able to link up in a way which I think will be quite devastating in the NPL Victoria. So it's something to look out for, South fans. But in the 29th minute, I guess those who were in the stadium witnessed an absolute peach of a goal. Kingston had the ball on the left-hand side, probably about 30 yards out, like 25 to 30 yards out. It was a mile out, South fans. The player, I'm not sure who it was, cut inside, onto his right foot, and unleashed, just a stunning curling top corner effort. Some might argue that Piers Clark may have been slightly off his line. You know what, South fans, I have a pretty vivid recollection of the moment. He may have been 2 or 3 steps in front of the goal line. It was an absolute peach of a strike from Kingston. Effectively a Christmas cracker in late January. And that made the scores 2-1. And, it looked like that was going to be the score at half-time. Again, there were, maybe some half chances, but nothing absolutely clear-cut. But, just as we thought it was going to be 2-1 at half-time, Brad Norton was released down the left. He worked his way into the box. Great low ball across the goal face to Harrison Sawyer, who with a back heel flick made it 3-1. And at that point, I think, his first goal in open play for South Melbourne, his third goal of the pre-season. As mentioned, in my report, for the St Albans match, he is a big physical specimen, South fans, and also quite athletic. It's not just like he's a big oaf up front. Very tall, pretty well put together from I guess a strength perspective. quick, likes to get involved. So it was great to see him score 2 goals, and he showed a touch of class to make it 3-1. So he went to the sheds leading by 3-1. And in the second half, Coach Esteban Quintas only made one change to start the second half. Goalkeeper Nikola Roganovic, a South Melbourne legend, of course, replaced Pierce Clark in goals. We then saw in the 54th minute Matthew Loutrakis and Brad Norton come off. They were replaced by Perry Lambropoulos and Luke Pavlu, who went into obviously a midfield position. Also, actually, with Folan. It was more of a central midfield position. Pavlu played. He didn't play a clean defensive midfield position. Coach Esteban Quintas, I think, kept Folan in that role all game because he obviously wants him to acclimatise to that position. I would say, provided he's fit, he probably would almost be a lock to have that position in round 1. In the 65th minute, Nick Crisaratis came on for Irwin. There weren't too many, in that 20-minute period, South fans. The game was quite even. Both teams, it's like you see in matches during the season when teams are feeling each other out. I'm not saying they were tense or anything like that. It's like they were going a little bit through the motions, holding their best back. And that's really what defined those first 20 minutes. However, approximately in the 71st minute, Nikola Roganovic showed, why he's one of the best keepers in the history of Australian football, in my opinion, with a superb double save. Both, low, hard shots inside the box from Kingston, both great dives, really, from Roganovic, one after another, maybe within the space of 2 or 3 seconds after making his first save, he flung himself again to make the second save. And that was again great to watch for the fans in attendance. Now, in the 78th minute, as mentioned earlier in the report, Daniel Clark, he had shown some quality, especially with his crosses into the box. He put in, a really super cross from open play from the left-hand side. Probably was just a little bit too far for Sawyer, but again, as mentioned, Sawyer is a physical specimen. He tried, a dying art, I feel, in modern football these days, a diving header, and just fractionally, missed connecting with it. South hands. It just skidded slightly off his head and went fractionally wide. It would have been a wonderful goal. Fortunately, it didn't happen. But 2 minutes later, Clark took another free kick from the left again and put a perfect ball. Probably just in front of the penalty spot, 8 to 10 yards out. Marshall unmarked. Had a couple of these chances against St Albans. So it's interesting to see how he is a player, obviously, who I think is quite physical and has the ability to rise up and win headers. He's been doing it in pre-season. Unfortunately, today, this was almost probably the best pre-season headed opportunity that has fallen to Marshall. He did head the ball down, which was, I guess, considered to be textbook technique, but the ball did go wide. Probably should have been 4-1 at that point. It wasn't. And then we saw in the 84th minute, central defender and under-20s captain Georgie Zarbos replace Sawyer, as well as 3 South Melbourne under-20s players. I'm not sure who they were. Maybe just trying to integrate them with the senior team, just give them a taste of what senior football is like. They came on for Clark, Karoma and Beckett. And then, essentially right on the 90th minute, Kingston had a corner from the left. This, South fans, did disappoint me. It was a good corner, don't get me wrong. It was taken really well. But effectively, it went past, it went to the back post, over the 6-yard box, and effectively found an unmarked Kingston player, from 2 or 3 yards out who couldn't miss. So that was a bit disappointing to concede that goal. Maybe the players let down their guard. I mean, it was a good corner, but potentially the goalkeeper could have saved it. There could have been defenders who could have headed it out. The player on the back post could have been marked. There's multiple scenarios that would have prevented that goal. I'd like to think it was because, the players knew the game was effectively over. It was the last play of the game. The referee blew the whistle immediately after. But still, it was disappointing to concede that. So that's something that hopefully we can look to iron out when we play our next pre-season game. I did hear that that game may occur this Sunday at the home of the Springvale White Eagles against Port Melbourne at 11 a.m. Let's see if the club confirms it. I think they will. But yeah, that's what I heard around the trap. So all in all, South fans, an encouraging performance. We win 3-2. We march on during this NPL Victoria 2020 preseason. I can't wait for the season proper to start. Go South!